Good evening. I'm Lonnie Stonich, the Executive Director of FAN, and I am honored to welcome you to an excellent conversation between two FAN favorites, co-authors Bill Stixrud and Ned Johnson. We're thrilled to welcome them back to Fanland, and thank you for attending. Before we begin, a quick note. Earlier today, the MacArthur Foundation announced its 2021 fellows, and we're thrilled to offer our congratulations to FAN speakers Hanif Abdurraqib and Ibram Kendi, both recipients of these genius grants, as they're called. Hanif will join us in October as a conversation partner for Questlove on October 14th, so stay tuned. FAN is a nonprofit organization that presents a high-quality speaker series offered free to the public on a wide variety of topics, including human development, mental health, education, and social justice, among others. We have over 150 videos of past events archived on our website and YouTube channel, so please be sure to explore. And now for introductions of two of my favorite people. Dr. William Stixrud is a clinical neuropsychologist and founder of the Stixrud Group, as well as a faculty member at Children's National Medical Center and an assistant professor of psychiatry and pediatrics at the George Washington University School of Medicine. He's also the co-author with Ned Johnson of the national best-selling book, The Self-Driven Child, which I wish I would have read when my son was little, and of their new book, What Do You Say? Dr. Stixrud's work has been featured in media outlets such as NPR, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Times of London, the Wall Street Journal, US News and World Report, Time Magazine, Scientific American, Bloomberg Businessweek, Barron's and New York Magazine, and probably others. He is a longtime practitioner of transcendental meditation, is a board member of the David Lynch Foundation, and plays, and we need to know more about this, Bill, plays in the rock band Close Enough. I need to know more. Ned Johnson is the author, speaker, and founder of Prep Matters, an educational company providing academic tutoring, educational planning, and standardized test prep in the Washington, D.C. area. A sought-after speaker and teen coach for study skills, parent-teen dynamics, and anxiety management, Mr. Johnson's work has been featured on NPR, PBS NewsHour, US News and World Report, Time Magazine, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. And he has written for the New York Times, the Telegraph, US News and World Report, and the Washington Post. FAN has had the pleasure of hosting Bill and Ned back in 2018, and we are very honored to learn from them again. So now, with no further ado, let's welcome Bill Stixrud and Ned Johnson.
So it's a pleasure to be here. We love FAN. We love Lonnie. It's just great to be here. And so Ned and I wrote this book, The Self-Driven Child. It came out in 2018. And our agent a year later said, I want you to do a second book that gives parents more language, to teach them how you talk to kids. I mean, you guys are really good at talking with kids, to teach parents how to do this. And so we thought about it. Well, between the two of us, we've been talking with kids one-on-one for 65 years. And I have two kids, Ned has two kids. We know something about it. Let's give this a shot. And it just made sense because so many parents, wonderful parents that we work with, they frequently say stuff like, I keep trying to get him to see. I've told him a million times. I keep nagging at him. I'm on him constantly because I just can't get him to do anything. And we're thinking, okay, we can probably help. There's probably some better ways to do this. And also, just in our first book, we have a fair number of scripts and dialogues with kids, and a lot of the parents said to us as we lectured the last 3 years, give us more of that. So we did. We wrote this book about communicating with kids. And I will say that I've been working with kids for 40 years, and they aren't equally easy to talk with. I tested this one kid when he was 11 years old, and I transitioned. I'm a neuropsychologist and I make a living by testing kids. And so I transitioned from cognitive testing to my clinical interview, and I said, so when you think about the kids you know, are you as happy as most kids, happier, less happy? And this kid said, can we play the library game? And I said, okay, what is it? He said, shh. In any case, in The Self-Driven Child, the main thesis is it's really important for kids to have a sense of control over their own life. The sense of control is hugely related to mental health and to motivation. And we thought, if we're writing a book about communicating, let's take a step back. because ultimately, ideally, probably most important thing that comes out of our communication with kids is building connection with them, is feeling close to them. And we asked dozens of kids. As we were writing the book, we met with these focus groups of older children and teenagers. And one of the questions we asked them is, who do you feel closest to? And sometimes it was a parent, but often it was a teacher or a cousin, an older cousin or an uncle. And we said, what is it that makes you feel close to this person? And invariably, the kids say, they listen to me without judgment and they don't tell me what to do. And we thought, well, this makes sense. We know that a close relationship with the parent is about as close as you can get to a silver bullet protecting kids from emotional problems. And so we knew that the keys to closeness are empathy and validation, letting kids know that we understand, that we're trying to understand their experience, that they aren't wrong to feel the way they feel. Now, do you want to talk a little bit more about this idea of it?
Yeah, there are a number of reasons why we think, and I think the science supports that empathy and validation as being so important. One, to begin with, it's strong feelings and sharing strong feelings with people we care about and who get us that allows us to be emotionally close. And as Bill pointed out, mentioned a moment ago, emotional closeness is about as close as we get to, the silver bullet against stress and anxiety. But also, empathy and validation are so important because as parents, we kind of often fall into trying to use logic to try to talk kids out of hard feelings. And logic simply doesn't calm hard emotions. It's feeling understood, like people get what you're feeling, what's been going on. So with empathy and validation, we want to seek first to understand, because when we do that, we can demonstrate that we can handle their hard feelings. There's a story. Bill and I were out in on the West Coast in Palo Alto, and given a talk out there. And the day after, we got an email from a mom who said that her son had come to her in the evening, who come to her later that night and was really upset. And he said, "Mom, I'm the weakest kid in all of 7th grade." And he was just a mess. And she said, normally I would have said, "Oh, sweetheart, that can't possibly be true." Or, "You have so many other skills. It's not such it's perfect." Or "You're going to get stronger, I'm sure of it." Or, "We'll get the coach," and all these things I normally would have done. But instead, I validated him. And one tool that we look at is reflective listening to this, a guy named Ron McGinn, who talks about wigging, which simply means what I got is. And you repeat back to people what they've heard. And so so I tried this, and I said, gosh, I'd be upset too if I wanted to be strong and I wasn't, or if everyone else was. And I listened to him, I validated how hard that must feel. And I didn't jump in and start trying to solve things for him or talk him out of his hard feelings. In part because I've been listening to you guys, in part because I wasn't quite sure what else to say. And she said, here's the amazing thing. The next morning at breakfast, he comes to me and he has a plan. He has a written plan, actually, for how he could get stronger. And said, "Mom, can you help me?" And part of this is we want kids to come to us when they have hard feelings, and we communicate that we can handle these hard feelings by, just by listening empathetically and not jumping into the problem-solving mode. And as we talked about quite a bit in the self-driven child, in a perfect world, we want kids to be able to solve their own problems with our love, with our support, but not just jump in immediately to tell them how to do this, because that drives them away rather than pulls them closer.
Yeah. And one of the things that strikes me about this is a lot of the communication skills that we're talking about in our book, you get better the more you practice them. But what struck me about this, when this happened, was just how fast things can change. There's just a simply resisting that urge to talk them out of it or to solve the problem for it, and just you change the energy that way. And it's hard, and it takes self-discipline, but you do it, and things can change very quickly. That's what really struck me, Ned, about that. Mm-hmm. And we also talk in the book about other ways to build that connection and closeness, including maybe certainly one of the most powerful ways is simply to plan in regular time, one-on-one with your kids during the week. I mean, and I read about this when my kids were in preschool, that this is one of the best ways you really could connect with kids. So from the time my kids were probably 3 until they left for high school, I on Sundays, I scheduled an hour one-on-one with each one of them. And it was, I mean, what we did during that hour to change, but it was terrific. And so we emphasize this being close to kids because it's so powerful. And we also revisit some of the themes that we talk about in the self-driven child. And one of them is the idea that as kids get older, we want to think about ourselves more as consultants to our kids rather than the kid's manager, the kid's boss, or the homework police. And this idea has 3 implications. One is that we offer help, we offer advice, we offer our wisdom, but we don't try to force it down kids' throats. Second is, as Ned said, second is that we encourage children to make their own decisions. And for adolescents, we require them, especially as older adolescents in high school, we require them to make important decisions in their own life, because we feel the best message you can give a teenager besides "I love you" is, I have confidence in your ability to make decisions about your own life and to learn from your mistakes. And I want you to have a ton of practice doing that before I send you off to college or wherever you're going to go, because that's how you become good decision makers. And I can't tell you how empowering it is to kids when you express that confidence in their ability to make decisions. So it's offering help and advice, not forcing, making decisions, encouraging kids to make decisions. And the third thing, as Ned said, is encouraging kids to solve their own problems. And it's because we want kids to become really good problem solvers. And when something stressful happens, we want them to go into coping mode as opposed to avoiding or freaking out. And the way that happens is they have manageable stresses. And rather than us trying to solve it for them, leaping in and solve it, they have to wrestle with it. And what happens when something stressful happens, is the kid's trying to figure out what to do. The prefrontal cortex is trying to figure out what to do. And when the prefrontal cortex engages, it dampens down the stress response. And then you can focus, you can think clearly, you can adapt. And that's what we want. We want kids to learn to trust themselves. And I was lecturing in Houston right before the pandemic. And I happened to mention one of the most elite schools in high schools in DC. And I don't remember why, but at the end of the lecture, this woman came up to me and said, I'm at the Menninger Clinic here in Houston, this very well-known and excellent mental health facility in Houston. And she said, we know this school in DC very well because so many of the graduates, they get into the most elite colleges in the country, but they can't handle them emotionally. So they take a medical leave and they come here for treatment. And she said, to the one, they just don't have that, what you talk about, that experience of running their own life, solving their own problems. And when we talk, the subtitle of our book includes the word stress tolerance. And we want kids to develop really high stress tolerance, meaning we don't want them to be stressed all the time. We want them to be able to function well in stressful situations and go into that coping mode. And so in the chapter, we talk about this. We give some language of a parent consultant. So it's not rocket science, but it's things like, I got some advice. Would you like to hear it? I wonder what would happen if you did it this way. I've been thinking about something. Can I run it by you? Just finding ways, or for whatever it's worth, ways to make it tentative so it doesn't feel like we're trying to force our ideas down kids' throats. Ned has this cartoon, and it's a dad with his 2 kids by the nape of the neck saying, "Listen up, boys, and listen up good, because I'm going to tell you this 1,000,000 times." And we just want to be more skillful. We don't want to just blah, 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 the kids just resisting everything. And the same, so we want to get buy-in. So we talk about the language of buy-in and the language of no force. That whenever I'm asked to help kids or to kind of help kids think about something differently, the first thing I tell them is, I'm not going to try to change you. I'm not going to try to make you do this. I don't want anybody to try to make you. I saw this kid a couple of years ago, I tested this kid, and before I tested him, the mom said, "Would you talk him into taking Ritalin? He's in 8th grade. He's getting C's. He's applying out to Catholic high schools. He'll never get in. He was diagnosed with ADHD in 2nd grade. Would you talk him to taking medicine?" And by the way, the pediatrician tried it a year ago, and the kid said, "Make me." And I sat the kid down and I said, I don't want anybody to try to make you take medicine. I said, Dad, if they do, all you got to do is put it in your cheek and pretend to swallow and then spit it out. I don't want anybody to force you. But I'd like you to make an informed decision, meaning I think you ought to try it and just see what it does, because if it doesn't help you, you aren't going to use it. If bad side effects, you aren't going to use it. If it helps you 20%, you can probably not worth it. But if it really helps you, you can decide to use it or not. And of course, the kid tried it and had a dramatic response to Ritalin. But almost always when we let kids know, I'm not going to try to force you, then we can really influence them. Then they're open to our influence. So in any case, that we have this parent consultant, and also this idea of, as much as possible, moving in the direction of being a non-anxious presence. Ned, why don't you talk about this?
Thanks, Bill. I mean, and part of this is when we confer more or allow more agency, a greater sense of control for our kids to make decisions, to clean up their own messes, to handle things, it's hard because as parents, we love our kids and we want to jump in with advice. We want to tell them what to do. We want to save them when they think they need it. And the more that we allow children, and especially teenagers, to kind of run their own lives, they have more control, which by definition means we have a little bit less control. And it is hard to bite our tongue, to button our lips, to sit on our hands. We're like, it's hard to do. And this is why we talk about the importance of a non-anxious presence, because if I go back to what Bill was sharing a minute ago, when kids can solve their own problems, the prefrontal cortex engages, it dampens down the stress response to the amygdala, and we get this beautiful connection between the thinking part of the brain and the stress part of the brain. And it wires the brains of kids and all of us to be stress tolerant, to not freak out, but to jump into coping mode. Part of that equation is for us as parents to sit there and we tolerate higher stress while we watch our kids go, "Oh, I hope this is a good decision." From a brain perspective, we also know that systems simply work better when the person or people who are in charge aren't overly emotional. They aren't overly reactive. Because if I, as a dad or as a leader, get super intense, my kid, his reaction, my daughter's prefrontal cortex is going to explode as well. And the amygdala is going crazy. And now nobody's thinking as well as they can think. And so we're really concerned about this. I mean, this is hard for everybody, but we're concerned about this in part because everywhere we went in the country, we thought DC was the most tightly wound place in the world. And then we realized we might get a bronze medal. We went to the West Coast, we went to the South, we went to the Midwest, we went everywhere. And so we see kids in 2nd grade with full school refusal, kids in Dallas, boys are overwhelmed by the pressure of 5th grade math. And you're like, it's 5th grade, are you kidding me? Right? And so this is a part to say, this is not to blame. This family did this, or you as a parent did this, but it must be sort of part of the ecosystem. It's in the zeitgeist. And that we feel that families, and especially children, must be getting kind of a drumbeat of messages of be very afraid, because otherwise, why would everyone be so wound up? So how do we communicate to kids, be very afraid? Well, some of it's through our language, some of it's through constantly checking, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? Checking their grades, all the tracking devices that are basically saying to kids, I don't trust you to get to school and back by yourself. I don't trust that you can handle your grades by yourself. I'm so worried about you that I have to check all the time, which also has the effect of making me more anxious. Here's the really important point. All emotions are contagious. Fear is contagious. And here's the great part. So is calm. We actually found out that this is a mantra of the Navy SEALs, who are dealing with some pretty hard stuff, I imagine, that calm is contagious. And so how do we do this? How do we communicate a non-anxious presence? Well, some of it is through our language, through positive language. We discovered that when you look at functional MRIs, when you use the word no, the brain systems of stress explode. It's just this cascading effect. Oh my gosh, right? And frankly, sadly, in ways that are way more powerful than positive words. So no or fear or hate is much stronger than love or calm or it's okay. So that means that we want to be really intentional because these words are so important, but they're a little less powerful than negative ones. And so we talk about the great research of John and Julie Gottman, who discovered this kind of magic ratio of 5-to-1, that we really need or want 5 positive comments for every 1 negative in order to keep things sort of glass half full. And in case you don't know them, they're these gurus on relationships, principally marital relationships. So that keeps everyone in a good place. So when you do finally come around with, actually, I got something I'm pretty upset about, your kid doesn't freak out, but they hear it as kind of just part of how systems work. And the other thing is we're huge fans of practices for lowering stress. For anyone who listened to me talk about this years ago, I had a pretty intense childhood and was wired to be a little bit hot. And as I've learned more and more about how my own brain works, and from people like the fabulous Dr. William R. Stixrud and others, I really practice things that lower my own stress. So I am as committed to being well rested as probably anyone in the Washington, D.C. areas who's not a sleep researcher. I exercise on a regular basis, and following the footsteps of the Dr. William R. Stixrud, I practice meditation twice a day because I know that I'm way more effective. And frankly, so are my children when I'm less anxious. And so we're really interested in talking about things that allow us as parents to take things in stride, to be less anxious, if for no other reason, that'll help you support your kids in having the autonomy that they need to be the people that you desperately want them to be.
I know this kid with autism, I think he was 17 when he learned transcendental meditation. And the mom was real wealthy and well-connected and was so blown away by the change in her kid that she wanted him to talk to a reporter. So the reporter said, what do you notice from meditation? And the kid says, TM calms the mind and it calms the mom. And
Can I jump in for 2 seconds?
Yeah.
So I won't dwell on the point, but my son, my wife, and our 19-year-old, about 8, 9, 10 weeks ago, I can't remember the date now, was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and he's a lovely child, so he had the good manners to choose the one that's most amenable to treatment. But if I were honest, we had different plans for our summer, and it was a lot. And my wife repeatedly said to me, she said, people have been saying to me, how are you so calm about this? And fortunately, we have good help in that. And, he's with the right people. So that helps enormously. But she said to me, honest to gosh, I don't think that I would be handling this the way that I am if I weren't meditating. So if you haven't explored meditation, certainly we encourage you to start looking at that.
Yeah. And we also talk about the language you use to help kids find their own motivation. And we harken back to what we consider to be the most useful theory about motivation, which is self-determination theory, which holds that to be intrinsically motivated, that our kids or ourselves have to have 3 needs met. One is for a sense of competence. One is for a sense of autonomy and a sense of relatedness. And we emphasize the autonomy in our first book because it's just the key to self-motivation. But what happens in our culture is that we emphasize competence at the expense of autonomy and often at the expense of our relationship. And we were struck in 2017 when the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation published this paper on the major causes of anxiety and mental health problems in teenagers. And the first 4 causes were poverty, trauma, discrimination, and excessive pressure to excel. And that overemphasis on competence, that Ned and I have always been struck by, we see so many kids who are just obsessively driven in a really unhealthy way. And because I see so many kids with learning disabilities and ADHD, a lot of anxiety disorders, we see kids who just feel that I'll never be a good student. What's the point of trying? And so we talk about the language is supporting autonomy. The language is supporting that competence. And going back to the first chapter, that language, that supporting that relatedness, that emotional closeness. And we also talk about the language you use that doesn't work. When we nag kids, we try to use guilt or fear, or we tell them loud, we get louder each time. To the 10th time, they finally want us off their back, so they do it. That doesn't build internal motivation. And I was at a meeting at another Catholic school on another 8th grade kid who I just tested, who had learning disabilities and ADHD and a language disorder, and school was really hard for him. And I get to the meeting, and the principal says, I keep telling him how he's got to turn this around. He's applying out to Catholic high schools. This is a 4-year decision. I keep trying to let him see how important this is. And this is a great principle, but I said respectfully, I think that this kid is pretty aware that if he does better in high school, now in 8th grade, he'll have more options. And my sense is he's already tried pretty hard to turn things around and just not being able to do it. So every time that we tell him it's so important, he gets more anxious. And we know that the major manifestation of anxiety is avoidance. And so he avoids this stuff because it makes him so anxious. And so let's change it. Let's tell this kid, let's help this kid see, I can see how to get where you are to a better place. I can see a little path here. And, it turns out that where you go to high school isn't that big a deal. There's all kinds of Catholic high schools. You'll get in some place. And if you don't like where you go, you can work really hard in 9th grade and transfer out as a 10th grader. And just changing the energy in this way, not making it such a big deal, and not making this kid feel I have to, but I can't, which is about as paralyzing a message you can get, that you can experience. That this kid really started to turn it around. So we talk about ways to communicate that are demotivating, and ways that communicate that are motivating, often including just making offhand comments. I mean, so often I'll see a kid who I know that the parents say, he doesn't work hard on stuff. He gives up really easily. And if I'm testing them, that if they stick with something and they don't give up right away, trying to solve a hard problem, later on, during a break, I'll say, I just noticed something. When we were working, I noticed that you really like hard. You like hard challenge. I mean, I was noticing you stuck with that thing a lot longer than most kids would have, and eventually you figured it out. I love that about you. And I started doing that many years ago because so often there's offhand comments that people made to me as a child that I remember. I still remember 40, 50, 60, 70 years later. Not 70, but and so the idea, so often parents say, how do I motivate my kid? That's certainly one of the questions that I get the most. How do I motivate my kid? We have a whole chapter on this. In many ways, what parents are asking when they say that is, how do I get my kid to change? So we also have a chapter about change. And Ned, you want to take over, talk about change?
Yeah, and I want to 10-second story or 20-second story about the offhand comments. I had a kid I worked with years ago, was in independent school, and her older sister was really classically academic in a way that this girl found harder. And I do test prep, so we're doing some jury test, and she got something right that was hard for her and kind of hard for everyone. And I sort of like, huh? And she said, what? I said, well, that's kind of geeky. And she's like, what? I said, well, most people don't get that right. And put my head down, and she put her down. I see this little smile out of the corner of her mouth. And then every break that she had from college, she came back, and I finally got this card over the holidays where, dear Ned, blah, 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 I'm loving college, and thank you so much. I don't know if I'd be here without you, blah, blah, blah. And at the very end of it, she said, thanks for making me a geek. And so oftentimes fewer words are more powerful than more words. But to Bill's point about, the language of change, when our kids are stuck, we want to help them change. We want to get them to a better place. If we're worried about the trajectory that they're on, we want to help them change. And we talk about in this book, the language and silence of change, which of course is, 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen a little more, talk a little bit less. And the dominant message that we have in this chapter is lessons that are born out of what's known as motivational interviewing. A guy named William Miller and a colleague, Steve Rolnick, who worked with problem drinkers. And classically, when people are drinking way too much, the people who are trying to help them would lean with, like, Ned, if you don't stop, you're gonna ruin your health. You're gonna lose, your wife is gonna leave you. You're gonna lose your job. You're gonna lose everything, as though giving me all the reasons why this is such a bad idea that I would finally change. But as Bill pointed out, I get stuck if if the thing that I must do feels impossible to do. I'm not going to do that. And so the two great insights about motivational interviewing are these. One, that we have a writing reflex. When people bring a problem to us or we become aware of a problem, we have this natural tendency to want to fix it. One, because we care about these people, we want to make it better. But also when other people we care about are suffering, it's really stressful for us. And we think, if only, gosh, Ned, if only you would stop, and we jump in with all of this advice. But here's the other really valuable point, that everybody is ambivalent about change. It's not lost on a kid who's getting, as Bill talked about, lousy grades, that if he got better grades, he'd have better choices. His parents would approve, he'd feel better about himself. His teacher would be happy. This would all be better. But it's really hard to do that. And I've tried that before and it didn't work, or I'd have to play less Xbox. I'm teasing, right? I'd have to give things up, or I could try really, really hard and still come up short. And then what would my parents think about me? What would I think about myself? And so in this, what we want to do is, because people have this ambivalence, when we argue all the reasons why you stop drinking, Red, the people argue all the reasons why it's so hard to do that, or the reasons why they want to keep doing what they're doing. And so what we want to do with this is look for change talk. And there's a story in the book I'll share really quickly. We have a friend who's the school counselor, and this girl, she was aware of this girl who was smoking way too much pot. And so she kind of sidled up to the girl and she got a chance to talk with her in her office. And she said, look, first of all, I'm not going to try to talk you out of smoking pot. You're a smart kid. I know you know the reasons for it, and I'm concerned about it, and I suspect you are too, but I really am. I'm interested. I'd love to understand better your relationship with, kind of, why do you smoke pot? And the girl thought, and she says, well, I feel less stressed when I'm high. The kids I smoke with are actually really funny. I probably wouldn't hang around with them if I weren't smoking too. I feel funny when I'm smoking pot, but it is kind of expensive. And this is where, of course, we would all naturally jump in. Well, there you go, right? But our friend is very deft, and she said, well, tell me more about that. And she said, well, if you were, well, she said, well, I buy twice a week and it's kind of expensive. She said, oh, okay. Well, if you only bought once a week, I don't know, if you had more money, what would you do with it? Oh, my friend has these really cool shoes. I'd so like those. And I haven't got my hair done for a long while. I think that'd be cool to do too. Okay, well, that's cool. And she was very light with this. And she sees the girl, I don't know, a couple, 3 weeks later, she has her hair done. She's like, oh, tell me about that. And the idea behind this is that as parents, as teachers, as caregivers, we can think of 1,000 reasons why it'd go better if you drank less or smoked less or got better grades. But to create the energy and with a deft use of communication to help kids articulate for themselves the reasons to do the things that they're ambivalent about, the reasons to do the things that are hard, so much more powerful than having someone else tell us the reason why we need to do it. And it also makes it less likely that they fight against what's in their own best interest.
Yeah. And especially with something like smoking pot or using drugs or drinking, it's much easier for a counselor to have that kind of more kind of reserved kind of discussion. Although I will say, I tested a teenage boy that early in the summer, who was the parents found out smoking pot, and we'd had this kind of discussion, and they started out by just trying to say, we want to understand this, kind of seek to understand first. And they said, we just had a couple of discussions about him, and he never really said, well, this doesn't work for me. But in the summer, he stopped smoking pot. And it doesn't always work like that, but just the idea, most of us, that, okay, you're in trouble, buddy, and we're stopping this right away. And yet we don't want power over our kids. We want to influence them. And if we can start with that curiosity and start with that non-judgmental, try to understand their experience, that we can help them, as Ned said, we can help them discover their own reasons for change. And they're going to be also more open to our suggestions or our perspective.
And if I can add two things to it,
Yeah.
really, really quickly, I mean, we know that 2 of the 3 core executive functions, meaning they're there from basically, 8 months on, are inhibition and mental flexibility, putting things in a different perspective. And when we're stressed, those executive functions are completely. And so when we can listen and use open-ended questions and reflective listening and empathy and validation, and we calm kids' hard emotions, we increase the strength of those executive functions and make it easier for them to have that inhibition or self-control and to find another way of looking at things.
Yeah. And also in this chapter on the language and science of change, we talk about this new program. The acronym is SPACE, and it stands for Supportive Parenting of Anxious Childhood Emotions. And it's a program out of Yale that for treating childhood anxiety and adolescent anxiety that only works with the parents. And it's proven to be as effective in lowering kids' anxiety as therapy is for the kids. And we just love this idea. And here's the idea. Both motivational interviewing and the SPACE program have the idea at the core that you can't change somebody else. And if we put energy into try to change somebody else, and they aren't asking us to help them change, all we get is resistance and we get conflict. And the SPACE program is based on the premise that as mammals, we're wired to protect our young and to soothe them when they're distressed. And with babies, with young children, we have to make them feel safe. We have to protect them. We have to soothe them. We have to learn how to soothe themselves. As they get older, that soothing themselves part becomes really important. And with kids who are anxious, it's really hard to do. And so what we tend to do is we make what they call accommodations, where that a kid needs to be reassured 20, 30, 40, 100 times a day about something he's afraid of. And the research suggests the more we do make those accommodations, the more anxious kids get. So the SPACE program, we communicate in a couple of different ways. First, we increase the supportive statements we would make. So for example, I know that you're really afraid standing the bus by yourself without me. And I used to think that I needed to stand there with you or you couldn't handle it. But I realize now that I'm 100% confident that you can handle it, but even though I know it makes you anxious. So you make these supportive statements. And also at some point, and certainly there's a new book about the SPACE program, and there's a lot of therapists who are being trained in it. But the idea is you say something like, I realize that this way that by reassuring you, 10 times before you go to sleep, it's just not helping. It's not making you less anxious. I think it's probably making things worse. So I'm not going to do that. I'll reassure you once before you turn off the light, but I'm not going to reassure you more than that. And I'm 100% confident you can handle whatever kind of anxiety that comes up. So it just focuses on our own steps, and it really powerful ways to help kids change. Ned, what we have a chapter called the hard ones because the topics we get the most resistance about. Do you want to?
Oh, you're giving me the hard ones, Bill.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Happy to. Yeah, the hard ones.
Take a little breaker.
Sure. Yeah, the hard ones: technology and sleep. And these are hard. One, for things like sleep, you can't make your kid go to sleep, and technology is really a challenge because you can't really shut it off. I mean, it's sort of like with food, technology is going to be part of everyone's life. And so we can't avoid it altogether, but we do really want to help our kids learn to use and manage their technology well. We love Devorah Heitner and Screenwise and the idea of kind of mentoring rather than monitoring, particularly as your kids get into their teenage years. In part because, there's a story in the book I'll share in a moment when my son was a sophomore in high school, and he's ADHD and really drawn to screens. But we knew that he was only a couple years away from going off to some far-flung college with a suitcase full of our money, mind you, where we couldn't monitor, we couldn't turn off the Wi-Fi, we couldn't. And so it really was our goal, our job was to help him learn to manage his use of technology himself. And there's some caveats to this, we can talk about those. But in the self-driven child, we talk about parent as a consultant rather than the manager or the boss or, the technology, because we're trying to help kids learn to do this themselves. So the story in the book, my son was a sophomore and he had a day off from school. I should say that in his sophomore year, Fortnite came through our house like a biblical plague. I mean, it was, and it was awesome. I mean, he loved it, but holy smokes, was all of a sudden this was consuming a lot of his time and attention. So he has this Friday off from school. So on Thursday night, I asked him, say, hey pal, so what are your plans for Friday? And he smiles and he says, Fortnite. And I'm like, awesome. Anything else you're planning? I'll think about it. Okay. So I go to bed. I get up the next day, I go to work. I come home from work out at 6 o'clock on Friday. There's my kid, whatever he's doing, still playing Fortnite, mind you, in his pajamas. I admit to being a little hot. I'm like, fortunately, Fortnite doesn't last forever. I'm like, can you wrap this up? When die? I don't really care because I like to go out for pizza, like we talked about. Oh yeah. Oh, and could you get dressed? Oh yeah. And he's an easygoing guy, so it makes it somewhat easier, I suppose. So I come down, we go and have pizza. We have a lovely time. I say nothing more. Saturday, I say nothing. Sunday morning, I say nothing. 5 o'clock on Sunday, which if you have an adolescent boy or brain that's like an adolescent boy, is sort of the witching hour when you go, oh, dang, that stuff that I need to do for tomorrow. Wait, tomorrow is tomorrow. And now he's upset. He's frustrated and he's like, I can't believe I wasted all of Friday. I didn't do any homework. Why did I do that? If ever there were a parental opportunity for I told you so, this was it. But we're in the middle of writing this book, so I didn't say that. So I said, you sure look really frustrated by that. And I can imagine that's pretty upsetting. Can I ask you a question? Sure. Do you know roughly how many hours you actually did spend playing Fortnite? Maybe 8 or 10. Wow. Was it fun? Oh, it was great. Yeah, we won like 4 times. I got these new skins and we totally trash talked these people. Awesome. But if in hindsight, how many hours do you think would have been necessary to sort of get your Fortnite fix? I don't know, maybe 4 or 5. Last question, because it sounds like you're a little frustrated by this. In the future, would it be helpful if your mom or I kind of helped you manage your use of technology so you could play, but also not feel like you wasted the whole day? Yeah, that'd be good. And now, as Bill mentioned at the beginning of our talk, now we had buy-in. And so we would ask him, you've got this paper. I know you're coming up in a couple of days. Would it be helpful if we held on to your phone? No, I've got to text Sam because we'll work on this together. Okay, great. Sometimes he'd say yes. Sometimes he'd say no. We watched a lot. We offered help, but we really took this effort not to control. And as Bill would remind me, his parole officer said he's doing great these days. No, I'm teasing. He went off to college and really had a really, really good year and succeeded in ways that were beyond my expectations. He certainly got way more things that started with an A than I did in probably the first 2 years of college. And these things are hard. And I know I'm making light of it a little bit, but these are hard things. And they're not just hard for kids, they're hard for all of us. And we really just think we want to take this consultative, collaborative problem-solving approach because we're not trying to have power over our kids. We're trying to have influence. And the great part is, even when he's in college, he would still say, we touch base once a week and he'd ask our advice, which is such a terrific outcome.
So Ned, we have 2 more topics in 4 minutes. So let's do speed rounds.
You got it.
Each. Okay.
Yep.
So I was out in Houston, as I mentioned, and I went to a different school, and I was talking with these high school kids who are in the student leadership. And I asked them, how many of you want to be happy as adults? And they all kind of sheepishly raised their hands. Oh, got a duh. And I said, what do you understand it takes to be happy as an adult? And this one kid said, well, we understand that if we get into a good enough college, everything else will be upset. We'll be all set. And I went, oh God, how could they be so wrong? When you look at the mental health problems in the most elite colleges, nothing could be farther from the truth. And we were also, Ned and I really liked the work of Laurie Santos, who a psychology professor at Yale, who started teaching this course on happiness because she lived in residential dorms and she saw how unhappy the kids were. And so she started teaching this course on what do we know about it takes to be happy? And it became the most popular course in the history of Yale University and still is. And we thought, do kids need to be wait until they're miserable in college to learn? Actually, here's what we know about being happy. So we have a chapter on talking with kids about the stuff that makes us happy, including just how to make our basic mood as positive as possible. Basic the importance of that experience of deep engagement, letting kids know how important their sports are. I mean, for my kids, I told them, baseball and softball, that's important for me. That's as important for your development as school is, because that deep engagement is so important. Relationships hugely important for happiness, but we often underplay as if achievement is more important. And achievement is part of it, but it's only part of it. And so we want kids to have an understanding from the time they're fairly early on that we're just pursuing pleasure doesn't make you happy. And let's really let them know, give them the chance at least to pursue the things that bring happiness.
Yeah, there's also in there, we talk about the neuroscience, the neurochemicals that are involved in pleasure versus happiness. And I was just blown away by this, and really useful for me to reflect on my activities in my life. And I think you all might enjoy that as well. The last chapter in our book is what about consequences? Because we get that a lot. Like you talk about autonomy and relationship, but what? And we believe in consequences, and we go into quite a bit of detail in this book. But the two big takeaways are this: one, we want kids to learn from consequences. We're huge fans of natural consequences, but logical consequences. Natural consequences happen without anybody doing anything, right? Without parents doing anything. Logical consequences are more complex, and we're fans of them. But we want this to be done well, because oftentimes the kids who get punished the most learn the least. And if we can remind ourselves that the etymological root of the word discipline is not to punish, it's to teach. And goodness knows, if we're using punishment and no one's learning anything apart from my dad is mad at me and he's doing this thing to me that makes me mad, there's not a lot of learning that's involved in there. And, we love the line of Jane Nelson said, where did we get the crazy idea that in order to help kids do better, we first have to make them feel worse? And so at the end of this kind of circles back to where Bill started, that relationships. And we can apply consequences, but we can do this in a way that our friend Ron again talks about, that shows care and respect. And it isn't lazy fair. It isn't, do whatever you want, pal. But it's really helping kids learn how the world works. And we start by doing that in our own household. And at the core of this chapter, and the core of all the chapters in this book, is about effective communication, because nothing can be more stressful than having great wisdom to share, great advice to share, support, consequences, and even sort of mild lectures about, well, that wasn't such a hot idea, and I want you to understand why. And it's stressful for us as parents to have this advice that we want in these lessons we want to impart to our kids, but we do it in ways that don't land. And like, Dad, you have no idea and you don't understand. And then they're frustrated with us and we're frustrated with them. And so the whole idea behind this idea of what he says is, we simply want you, in all the ways that you love your kids and want to teach your kids, including with consequences, that you simply do it with language that's effective. Because at the end of the day, we first read The Self-Driven Child and this follow-up book, What Do You Say? The incidence of stress-related disorders of anxiety and depression are just terrible. And they certainly haven't gotten better under COVID and the events of the last year. And there's some things about the world we're all working hard to change. And there's some things that we can't change fast enough. But if we know that a close connection between a child and a parent, a child and a caregiver, if that's a silver bullet against the ravages of stress on developing young minds, goodness knows we want to take every opportunity. And a big part of that is how effectively we as parents communicate with our kids. So, Lonnie, do you have questions for us?
I do.
Great.
And posting, and there were several that were also submitted ahead of time, but I'm going to start with the folks who are here right now. So let's go to Robin's questions. He says, and let me move this so my head isn't turned. I'll go to my other screen. Here we go. She asks, how can you apply these principles to everyday household tasks and chores, requests that aren't subject to consultation? Do you need to expressly distinguish those?
Well, I think that many wise parents work out with kids what chores what chores they're going to do. Here's the jobs that need to be done, and we kind of, it's a discussion. And so some kids are happy to clean up their room, but they can't stand to clean the bathroom, and we can kind of divide that up. And oftentimes we think that every little decision we make here, everything, that we can't let a kid get away with something. And in the book, we talk about the fact that really there's so many influences in kids' lives, that there's so many people who influence them besides us, that, if we let things slide a little bit, or our kids don't do their chores perfectly, that we don't have to worry that somehow that they're going to be ne'er-do-wells and chronically irresponsible. So we think the wisest thing is to make a chart of all the household chores and kind of divide them up and change them that is necessary. And if kids don't do their part, then when we're in a good mood, so let's talk about this chore business. I mean, I don't want this to be a big fight between us, because I love you too much to just fight with you about this all the time. But it's stressful for me, because I want you to have some responsibility here, and having that kind of discussion and just letting it, hopefully it generally gets better and better and better over time, as opposed to thinking that somehow we have to make the kid do this now, or he'll never learn. Ned, do you want to add in?
Yeah, no, I just interviewed Dr. Madeline Levine, who's probably most well known for her terrific book, The Price of Privilege. And she has a book out called Ready or Not. And she has this beautiful kind of age appropriate chore chart of kind of what we can assign, what we can have kids do. And in my household, one thing, a real turning point was having this conversation about who does what. Because what I'd fallen into this trap, actually, Michaeline DeCleffe talks about this beautifully in Hunt, Gather, Parent, of kind of keep, you got to do this, remind you, it's sweetheart, and sort of just kind of, for lack of a better word, boss him around all the time. When we as a family sort of made lots, and then people chose their lots of, I'm responsible for this and I'm responsible for that, it was a spectacular change in their compliance, for lack of a better word, but certainly of all of our energy, that I'm responsible for this, where kids say, I was going to do it, but when you reminded me, it made me not want to do it. Because again, that undermines the autonomy, it undermines the relatedness, and it undermines the sense of competency. So chores are incredibly important, because we all need to have responsibility for things as we move out into the world. But again, it's not the what, it's the how. And if nothing else, as Bill said, if you sort of quadrant it up and everybody has their job, but I don't remind you to do your job unless you want me to, and you don't remind me to do mine. And we can perhaps address that on a family meeting on Sunday and say, how did that work? But not do it every minute or every hour of the day.
There were a couple comments on Ned directed towards you, that people are keeping your son in their thoughts and prayers.
Thank
so
you.
I wanted to convey those to you as well. There was a question that got upvoted quite a bit about screen time, but I feel like you did address that pretty well in towards the end. You gave a lot there. So I'm going to go to a question from Stuart. He says, in such an anxious, ridden, and pressure environment like independent schools and schools in general these days, what are some ways that parents can emphasize social emotional skills in concert with, quote, doing well academically, unquote, and the pressure to be, quote, perfect, unquote? Yes, grades are important, but so is failure.
Yeah. And we have a chat, we didn't talk about it, but we have a chapter in the book on expectations. And in which we talk about perfectionism and the really very interesting difference between the healthy pursuit of excellence and perfectionism, and when I work with perfectionistic kids, I talk to them about this research that says, I don't want you to give up that desire to do a really good job, or to really work hard to commit something, to have a good product. What I want you to think about over time giving up is the idea that if you make a mistake, it means you're a total failure. Because what we know that people who are perfectionists, as they get older, they're less successful than other people, because they try to hide their mistakes and they don't learn from them, as opposed to the people who really have this healthy pursuit of excellence, that mistakes become feedback for doing even better. So part of it is we want to, I think, I'll say one last thing, which is Ned and I feel that some of the kids that we work with, and some of their parents think the most important outcome of their childhood and adolescence is where they go to college. And we think that the most important outcome is really having a healthy brain, and a brain that's not used to being chronically tired, chronically stressed, or chronically busy, so that they're anxious if they aren't working every second. And so I think that getting our own mindset and helping kids understand that their own brain, and that we want kids to be able to enjoy their success. And we said so many kids who are so successful and they're so friggin' unhappy. Want them a brain that can enjoy their success. And Ned,
Yeah, and I love Aristotle had a quote. He said, "Excellence is not an act, but a habit. We are what we repeatedly do." But even he didn't say we have to do it all the time. It's what we do most of the time. But also, if you have a kid who's perfectionistic, we oftentimes are likely to try to say, "Sweetheart, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be the best all the time." Da, da, da. And we tend to get kids, "You don't understand," and they cling to it more tenaciously. And we can do the same kind of thing, with a different approach, and say things like, "Gosh, it must be hard to feel like you have to be perfect all the time." And you'll typically get a kid that you have no idea, everyone. And it invites, it's that buy-in, and it opens the door for us to step in to share our wisdom, because we're convinced that the kids they're on their perfectionistic bent because they're afraid that if they don't do whatever they think they need to do, that something terrible will happen from them. And part of it is, again, just how we use the energy. And to take a note from Bill said before, I have to get an air of, I'll never go to Northwestern. You say, well, I see it a little bit differently. It's hard for me to see you upset. I have a different take on that. If you'd like me to share it, I'd be happy to let you know how I see it. And then if they say no, you just bite your tongue. But if they say yes, now you have an opening and say, well, the way that I see it, because the kids want to be successful, but they also want to be happy, and they want to feel safe.
Well said. We're going to roll out with Carolyn's question as our last question, though I will note, however, first of all, we are giving away books. I think we're giving away about 150 books to attendees here. Our partners also got some books. Some of the event sponsors got books. We're giving away a total of 500 books. So we're happy to support this book. We love both of you and your work. I did note that Ned is a very excellent name dropper, very skilled. So if you want to learn a little bit more, Madeline Levine, we've hosted, I think, 3 times in the last probably decade. We have video of Madeline on our website. We have video of Michaeline Duclef on our website if you want to see her. Someone asked a quick question that we're not going to get to. We have Ross Green we hosted, but Carolyn, let's go out with her question. So do you think overparenting has increased during COVID due to closer quarters and more involvement in our kids' lives? And if so, what should parents focus on as we start to emerge from the pandemic? And we won't quibble about, are we emerging? Is it still going on? Is it not? Let's just go with it.
Ned, do you want to start this time?
And you have about 2 minutes.
I mean, the short answer is yes, in part because all of us as parents have had this kind of up close and personal view on our kids doing school, or if we're honest, probably not doing school. And it makes us nuts. It makes us crazy. There's wonderful research by a woman named Jessie Borelli out of UC Irvine. We talk about this in the book, and she has this experiment. She's a researcher on parental over control. So there's that. So here's the experiment that she did, and people can understand this, I think. So she has these kids, maybe 12, 13, and they're doing a digital puzzle, and they have a parent. I think in this case, it's all moms along, just to help. But the advice is that they're there to give moral support and encouragement, and they have one instruction, and it's simply this: don't tell your kids how to do it. Don't give them advice on moving the pieces or whatever. The puzzle looks really simple. Turns out it's not. Kids are working, they think, I'm going to make mom so proud. And then okay, well, let me do over here. And they're working at it, they're getting kind of a little stressed out about this. And as they get stressed out, their moms, because they love them and want their kids to do great and look smart and feel good about themselves, they get stressed. And they know this because both of them have heart rate monitors on. And eventually every mom just loses it, and they go, no, sweetheart, over to the left. No, the other left. No, turn over there. And they start giving instructions, even though they had one rule. They had one rule. And when they do this, here's the great part. When they do this and jump in, they jump in because seeing someone you love struggle and being distressed is distressing, because that's how we're wired. And when they jump in and start giving instructions, they see their heart rate go, and it comes down, and they feel better because they're doing something. They have a sense of control. Sadly, their kid stress continues to go up. And so we talk about this, I think, in both books. We offer advice, we offer help, but if it drives you nuts to watch your kid, in the first book, we say, it drives me crazy to watch him waste so much time. And I sagely, perhaps not as supportive as I might have said, don't watch. And you make yourself available, but if you're monitoring the whole time, it's crazy making for you and your kids, and it's just not effective.
All right. On that note, thank you so much to the two of you. You are such fountains of wisdom. We adore every single thing you do. Let us know when the next book's coming. I know it is going to come at some point, and we'll be right here waiting for you. And actually, you'll be in Chicago, I bet, the next time.
Love that.
Love
that.
We're so grateful. No one does this better than Fan.
Oh,
We're so grateful to be with you.
We love you guys. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. You really do need to check out Sarah Stein Greenberg and Liz Gerber on Thursday. That book has floored me. Anne Marie posted our October flyer is in chat here. Grab it, throw it on your desktop. What a month October is going to be. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you all soon in Fanland. Thank you so much. Good night.